What is going on there, gunfighters? Saddle up for another episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, all kinds of stuff. Today, hot 9mm, almost its own caliber. Now, part of the reason I started this podcast is there's a lot of gun content out there, and a lot of it's entertainment, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Wrong with like going out and shooting watermelons or whatever. And there's a lot of content out there that's not really based in any real-world first-hand experience, training, anything like that. Because of that, I usually put in the bio to establish some credibility with the things God's blessed me to do. Now, if you want to skip it, I don't expect you to listen to it every single time. Skip around 2 minutes. Probably have a little fast-forward thing on whatever device you're listening to it on. Just tap it a couple of times. That said, while you're listening or fast-forwarding through it, if you could like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast, if you appreciate, good, based on real-world first-hand training and experience information, consider passing it on as well. Consider liking, subscribing, helping other men find it, and just sharing it with other men. With that, I'm going to plug in the bio, and we'll get into Hot 9. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other 3-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength, it's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. Hot 9mm. Plus P and plus P plus. That's what we're talking about. First, I should, define what I would consider hot 9mm, and then some of the philosophy behind it. Because when I did a survey, you guys were kind enough to respond and say what you wanted more of was philosophy type stuff. So let's philosophize here about 9mm in general, hot 9mm. First of all, what is it? Well, standard pressure 9mm. Common loadings, 115, 124s, 147s, at their average moderate velocities. 147 is usually talking about under 1,000 feet a second subsonic. The lighter grain bullets are going to be slightly faster. Now, here in America, we have this called SAMI, and this is not a slam on SAMI, but they kind of dictate how ammunition is loaded. As much as we might think here in America of European men as maybe being more effeminate or whatever, the hard reality is that Europe tends to load their ammo for a given caliber hotter than we would here. And if we load ammo that hot here, we consider it plus P. So a lot of the European loads, although they may not say plus P, they're often loaded hotter. And you can like that or not, but you check it, and I think you'll find it to be true. A lot of the European loads are going to be hotter. They're going to be loaded hotter. For whatever reason, they load a lot of their calibers hotter. A 9mm is definitely in that category. Whereas here, we might call it a plus P. For instance, a real clear example of this is a NATO load. NATO loads are generally plus P. What we would see as, if it was a civilian marketed load here in the U.S., it would probably be labeled plus P. A little bit hotter than your standard plain vanilla 9mm of the same grain weight. I'm not saying that's always the case. There's other things that go into it being a NATO load, NATO approved load, things like maybe a staked primer pocket or things like that, but you get the idea. Loaded a little bit hotter usually. And let's say what plus P and plus P plus is. Plus P means plus pressure. Classic one of this is 38 special, standard 38 special, then 38 special plus P. It's loaded hotter. It's not quite 357 Magnum. It's not even close to 357 Magnum, but it's definitely hotter than 38 special. There are some much older guns, which to be fair to Sammy, this is kind of why they do this, so you don't throw it in an old 1800s 38 and blow your gun up. They have 38 special plus P. So that's plus P, plus pressure. Loaded to higher pressure, which generally, not always, you can get some weird stuff going on ballistics, but in general, more powder, in general, more velocity for a given grain weight. Then there's plus P plus. Plus P plus is even hotter, as you might imagine, than plus P. Hot loads. Now, we live in a very litigious society. If you blow yourself up, blow your gun up, get some shrapnel in your face, that's your fault, not my fault. Make sure your gun is rated for the ammo you're going to use in it. Now, 9mm is the standard. Like it or not, it is the de facto handgun caliber of our time. It is kind of the go-to. And I think for good reason. It's not always the best choice, but it's often the best choice. You have to decide that for yourself, but it is the standard. Like if you're looking for a defensive handgun, I'm going to start with 9mm, and if you have some other parameters, some other specialty things, I might say, okay, well, maybe look at this caliber. But it's the standard. You can like that or not, but I don't think we can deny in 2024 that it is. In standard pressure 9mm, just regular old vanilla 9mm, whatever flavor you like, 115 grain, 124, whatever, 147 is actually what I like. I like a little bit heavier for caliber, lower velocity. However, whatever you like, rock on. Roll with it. And I think that's generally the go-to. Now, you might want some more power. And you might want some more power without bumping up to... Now, you might decide you want a little bit more power. You might decide, for whatever reason, that you want to stick with a 9mm chambered gun that can handle hotter ammo, and for your scenario, that makes more sense. You have, I don't know, a Glock 19, and that's what you have. But for your parameters, you've decided you want hotter loaded ammo. Okay, well, there's the hot 9mm. There's the plus P and the plus P pluses. There are many different reasons for this. One, and this usually isn't the case, but it can be the case that a gun just runs better and is more reliable with really hot ammo. And not always the case, but sometimes is the case. You may want a certain load for barrier penetration. You may want a certain load for some kind of animal defense. You may decide you want a hotter load, but you still want the capacity of 9mm. You don't want to give up capacity going to like a 357 SIG or 40 Smith & Wesson or a 45 ACP. But you want a little bit hotter than standard 9mm. So they are more powerful in general. Now, you may not be able to realize that potential because of a shorter barrel or whatever, but they have more, and you could probably cherry pick and find an exception of a standard pressure load that performs out of a certain barrel length, maybe better than a plus P, but in general, they have more power. Now, what I'll try and do is talk about some, not all, obviously that would be a crazy long episode, but some good go-to. Now, what I'd like to do is roll into some hot 9mm loads, and then at the end we'll do some more philosophy type stuff. Now, you're going to hear a difference in the audio because this is my second time recording part of this episode because it got lost. It got dropped. I don't know how that stuff works. It's floating around somewhere, but I can't find it. I recorded it traveling across country, and this is recorded with a different microphone, so you may notice some difference in audio quality. Hopefully you'll forgive the foibles, idiosyncrasies for the content itself and still enjoy it. So with that, we'll roll into it. Okay, so let's get into some good loads. I'm going to start out with the one that I'm most familiar with, and this is not the best name for marketing, but it wasn't made for civilians, marketed for civilians. You can get it, but it's Federal 9BP LE. The LE is important. The Federal 9BP is standard pressure. It's still a good load, but what we're talking about today is Federal 9BP LE, and it is a spicy round. It is plus P plus. I wish I could remember, but at one time I was shooting a lot of this stuff, and I was thinking, I don't know how this is going to treat my firearm. And so I wrote to Federal, and they were kind enough to get back to me on what the actual pressure was. And it was high. I forget exactly how high it was. That's why I don't want to comment and give you a wrong number. But it was high. It was obviously higher than plus P. Otherwise, it wouldn't be designated plus P plus. Federal 9BPLE has got a lot of street cred as far as plus P plus rounds. It's been around a long time. This is not a Johnny-come-lately round. This is a round with decades of street cred. It is probably like a Gen 1 hollow point, early technology, but the thing is just screaming fast. And it's made well, especially it's got a really good bullet profile if your gun's at all finicky on feeding, like truncated cone type bullets or flat nose type bullets. This has got a fairly small hollow point with a fairly rounded front, but it's going at such crazy velocities, not crazy, but very high velocities, that it expands, and it expands very well in general. They're not every hollow point. There's no 100%. There's always a case where a hollow point may not expand. But it's got, again, a lot of street cred. So that's why I'm starting there, that and the fact that I have the most experience with this round. And that is a Federal 9BPLE. Let me give you some numbers. Now it lists a 115 grain bullet at 1,300 feet a second. It's a spicy load. And again, there's no free lunch. It has more recoil, but if you want a good hot 9mm load with a lot of street cred, just has a reputation for working well on the streets, that Federal 9BPLE is a good choice. The other one that has, I'd say, a decent amount of time behind it and has been around a while. Now, the Winchester Ranger T127 plus P plus. It is launching 127 grain at 1250. Those are respectable numbers. A 127, I assume they just picked that because that bullet was the right shape and stuff to perform well in testing and gel and stuff like that. 127 is kind of an odd grain weight. You don't see a lot of it. You see a lot of 147, you see a lot of 125s, 124s. You don't generally see a lot of 127s. But that said, it's a decent round. It's hot. It's 127 at 1250. To give you an idea, in that same Ranger T line, the 357 SIG, which is a cartridge I also like, is launching 125 grains, about the same weight, 2 grains less at 1350. So only 150 feet per second, or only 100 feet per second faster, 100 feet per second faster rather, than the hot 9mm. That's something to think about, right? If you like the idea of 357 SIG, but you don't want to have to go through all the rigmarole of barrel slide swaps, maybe even a whole new gun, things like that, the added cost of the ammo, and the fact that you can just only shoot that one round out of that gun unless you get other conversion barrels. But that hot 9mm, again, you're getting not there. I mean, you're still 100 feet per second off, but you're getting a lot closer, right? You're getting a 127 at 1250. And obviously, for the numbers I quoted on the other load and for this load, that's the manufacturer's numbers on the box. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but those numbers tend to be optimistic, let's put it that way. And these are duty loads. These are meant for a full-size fighting handgun, which I recommend you carry anyway. But just realize that you're going to lose velocity and you're going to get probably quite a bit of blast and muzzle flash if you shoot these out of some little baby Micro 9. So keep that in mind. These are meant for full-size fighting handguns. But that Winchester 127 plus P plus, not just because it's hot. The Winchester Ranger T, I use a slightly different loading, but I like Ranger T and I have for years. And, when I can choose between anything, I generally choose the Ranger Ts. And I usually go with the 147 standard pressure. I don't want the plus P day to day, but I like 147 Ranger Ts. They just perform really, really well. But that being said, all the Ranger line tends to perform pretty well. So it's one to consider. And it's hot, right? Plus P plus. It's, again, 127 at 1250. That's a spicy load. And especially if you run out of a long slide, a longer barrel, which I did when I was a cop, not that low, but the plus P plus out of a long slide, because I'd try to compete with the same gun I carried on duty. So I would have at the time, Smith & Wesson M&P Pro, which is the long slide version. The longer the barrel, the more velocity. Anyway, it's something to think about. Another load that has a lot of time behind his belt and has a good reputation is the Spear Gold Dot. Now, Spear Gold Dot makes a lot of loads. The 124 grains, they make a standard 124 grain and a plus P 124 grain. Now, the Spear Gold Dot 124 grain plus P, and apparently in doing research for this episode for you guys, there is some other plus P loadings, but the classic the classic Spear Gold Dot 124 grain plus P. It's 124 grains at 1220 feet per second. Not far off the plus P plus we just talked about. A little bit less grain weight, a little bit less power, but you're talking about a plus P instead of a plus P plus. Again, check yourself before you wreck your gun. But you blow your gun up or get a bunch of crap in your face, blind yourself, that's your fault. That's not my fault. But most modern, well-made guns, not the budget gun, not the hashtag #MeToo gun, but an actual, made for hard use, modern fighting handgun is going to be rated for plus P. Your Beretta 92s, your SIG 226s, your Glocks, even Glock will handle them, okay? Your Smith & Wesson M&Ps, your HK VP9s, HKP 30s, those kind of guns, right? Those well-made for hard use kind of guns. They'll handle a plus P. So if you're not sure about the plus P plus, here's a plus P option, again, that's been around a while. It's no Johnny-come-lately, 124 grains. Spear Gold Dot. Spear Gold Dot's got a solid reputation. I don't know if it's the best in the industry, but it's definitely up there in the top probably 3 of ammo reputation. Spear Gold Dot in all kinds of calibers. But this is a pretty classic loading, the 124 grain plus P. And again, most of your decent handguns are going to be rated for plus P ammo. So if you want a plus P load that's really good, that's got the street cred, which has some other benefits we'll talk about at the end, you might start looking at this one. 124 at 1220 is respectable. It's a hot load. Now, this is not as old, but it's been around a while. I still think of it as a new load, which I guess tells you how long I've been doing this as far as being a professional gunfighter most of my adult life. And if you guys don't know, it's my birthday this month, and I will be 40, which I'm kind of looking forward to because I often forget how old I am. Like, am I 37? Am I 38? Well, I'll be 40, and that'll be easy to remember. By God's grace, still strong and healthy. And just actually on this trip back across country, got a message from, well, God willing, I don't want to give away too much, but God willing, I'll be picking up a contracting job to be a professional gunfighter again for people I won't talk about. But still strong and healthy as ever. Going on 40. Anyway, what was I talking about? This load I still consider a new load, but it's not new, right? It's the Hornady Critical Duty 135 grain plus P. It's a plus P load. This is kind of your new, I said it's a new load, and it's not new. It's been around a long time. I forget exactly when, but I experimented with carrying it, I don't know, I want to say around 2010 is when I experimented with carrying it. So, I mean, that's, if that date is right in my head, that's 14 years ago. I still consider it a newbie. But it's a proven load at this point. It's 135 grain plus P. And as I alluded to, it is kind of that newer technology, what I would call like a third-gen hollow point. I've done a whole episode on that, like bullet technology and stuff, but it's got a lot of more advancements. Whereas we talked about that Federal 9B PLE, is I believe it's just a cup and core bullet, a lead bullet with a copper jacket. This has a bonded core and jacket. It's also hardened. It's a hardened lead. It's not just regular lead. It's a hardened lead. It also has that, I think they call it elastomer, whatever Hornady calls their proprietary squishy clown nose they put in their bullet. I think they call it elastomer. That might be Spear that I'm thinking of. They call it something. It's a squishy filler that has some hydraulic engineering properties that when it hits something, it squishes out like, well, let's just be grizzly here, like meat would when it actually hits the hollow point. And this can stop it from getting clogged. Now, again, strange things can happen in ballistics. They don't always expand, but they're kind of their big claim to fame is being barrier blind, right? They're good for windshield glass. They're good for going through sheet metal. And a lot of rounds will do that, but they'll start to come apart. This one is supposed to come apart less and still expand some when it hits your intended target after going through those intermediate barriers. It's got a lot of technology in this bullet. Again, bonded, hard cast, or some kind of antimony or something to make it harder than regular lead. And it's got that. It's also, I should mention, a truncated cone, which I actually really like truncated cone bullets. And it's got that hollow point filler in there. And it's a plus P load. It's a good load. Now, when this load first came out, it was the first one that I was aware of. I'm sure you could hand load, or it might have existed somewhere, but it was really the first mass popular, if I can just coin that term, mass popular, 135 grain 9mm load. In general, you had your 124s, 125s, and then you had your 147s. I didn't see a lot of 135s when this thing came on the scene. Now I see a few more, maybe because of the success of this round. So if the heavier for caliber still kind of appeals to you and you want all that technology, this might be the round for you. It, I believe, was adopted by the FBI some years ago. Not the only one, but a approved load. It's a decent load. But it's a good proven load at this point, that 135 grain plus P critical duty. Now, I mention these loads because they have one of the big things for a load. If you're going to trust your life or somebody else's life to it, it should be proven, right? Especially, if you listen for any length of time, I have the general 3-year rule. when it comes to a new firearm model. Unless you just want it for fun, you go plink at the range. But this is not gun plinking life. This is not poser life. This is not looking cool on pictures on Instagram. In half a mile, keep right. This is not plinking life. This is not poser life. This is not hashtag look at me on Instagram life. This is gunfighter life. Why would you trust your life to something unproven? Why would you go out and grab the next latest and greatest model of gun that came out when it's not proven? Let one of those guys that, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you want to go shoot or watch somebody, go shoot watermelons or something at the range, or just want to try out the latest and greatest gun, that's fine. But I would caution you on adopting it if it's not proven. If you're going to trust your life or somebody else's life to it, it should be a proven platform. Even more so on that with ammo. Right? If you're looking for good defensive ammo, don't look for the latest and greatest, craziest thing, the game-changing round. Something that's way out of spec, super light, crazy high speed for caliber, all this weird stuff. Look at a proven, street-proven load. You're trusting your life to it. You're trusting other people's lives to this round. You should not think that it should. You should know that it's going to perform well. And it should have some validity behind it. It should have some T&E behind it. Don't jump on the bandwagon of the next latest and greatest load. And again, unless you just want to go out and have fun with it. Go out and shoot bowling pins to see how it does. Go out and shoot watermelons. Go out and shoot just for fun. But I'm mostly coming at this from a usable, defensive handgun round. So get something that's proven. That's why I started with those. Now, there are manufacturers that kind of pride themselves on hot loads. Buffalo, Bore, and Corbin come to mind. Both of these, Buffalo, Bore, and Corbin, are known for making spicy loads. Not every load they make is going to be crazy hot, but they're kind of known for this. Corbin's been around a while. Buffalo Bore's been around a while. I think they've got probably less T&E cases behind them than the rounds that I mentioned, but they make good ammo. If you want to look for the hottest, heaviest 9mm loads that are still a traditional, not some crazy lightweight, high-speed round or something like that, you might want to look at the Buffalo Bore and the Corbins. Oh, and Double Tap. How did I forget Double Tap? Double Tap is also another one like this. They make quite a few spicy loads, not just for 9mm, but in lots of stuff. If you're looking for a 45 long Colt load or something, one of those manufacturers probably makes a spicy load for that. And again, you got to check the manufacturer. Don't be loading some spicy, plus P 45 long Colt load from Buffalo Bore in your grandpa's single action army Peacemaker. But those manufacturers are known for making some spicy loads. Now, just for an idea, they list a 124 grain at $1,300, which, to give you an idea, is what that other plus P plus load. This is Buffalo Bore. That's what that other plus P plus load was listed with 115 grain. This is listing the same velocity with a 124 grain plus P plus Buffalo Bore load, and they listed a 115 grain at $1,400. Again, spicy loads. They list a 147 at $1,100 plus P, 147 grain hard cast lead. I'm not going to go through all those manufacturers. That's not even all the loads that Buffalo Bore makes, but they make some spicy loads. Depending on what your criteria is and what you want, that will probably dictate which load you're going to settle on. And again, I recommend a plus P only if you are already good with the 9mm and you're willing to make the trade-off for less shootability and slower follow-up shots. Because I don't care how good you control recoil, if you reduce the recoil, you shoot faster, given a certain size target at a certain distance. That's how that works. Can I shoot a 45? Yeah. Do I like shooting 45? Yeah. Have I carried a 45 on duty? Yep. Do I like rocking a 1911? I sure do. Can I shoot my STI 2011 and 9mm faster than I can shoot my 45 Colt Combat Elite? Yeah, I can. That's how that works, right? So, I guess that's a good thing to transition to some other things to consider. I call this philosophy part 2. Why I generally don't run plus P. Again, is it more powerful round for round? Yes. Does that necessarily make it more effective? No, not necessarily. It has a potential because it has more power. But here's some other things to consider besides what's just on paper. You've heard me talk about this if you've listened for any length of time. A giant criteria for you, if you're going to carry that ammo, you need to know that it's going to function out of your gun when fired by you. Not somebody on YouTube, not this gun reviewer said, not that I said. So I've mentioned that I really like and use for, I have my most experience with the Federal 9B PLE plus P+, as far as these hot loads go. That said, I don't know that's going to work in your gun. Even if you're rocking it out of a Smith & Wesson M&P Pro, that doesn't mean that it's going to work out of your gun. I haven't the foggiest idea. And you don't either until you actually do it. I don't care if there's some dude on YouTube with the same gun, same ammo. That's a decent indicator. But you got to test it out of your gun when fired by you. Talking about way back in the day when this was still when it actually was like a newer round. And this is not a knock on the round, and this is not a knock on the gun. They just didn't play well together. That Hornady critical duty FBI load 135 grain plus P, one of my Glocks just didn't feed it well. It did not get along well with that gun. You think a Glock's super dependable, they'll eat anything. And okay, well, I'm here to tell you I've had a lot of Glocks that didn't like lots of different kinds of ammo. So that's not true. And don't assume, again, that your gun is going to like that ammo. That particular Glock did not like that particular load. And it's a good load, and it was a good gun. In fact, I carried that gun for many years, I think, unless I got a similar one. But there's nothing wrong with the gun, per se, nothing wrong with the ammo, per se, but they have to work well together. They're a team. It is a system. It is a relationship between the gun and the ammo that has to work well together. So you got to test it out of your gun. And another big disadvantage, these tend to be, you might find some on sale or something like that, or maybe some exceptions, but these tend to be more expensive than regular loads. It's just period. So they're more expensive. And if you have an ammo budget, if you have a blue sky budget, right, or just the government's buying your ammo, no big deal. But if you're buying your ammo, if you have a budget, you're going to be able to buy and train more with generally more standard ammo, which to me is more important than how spicy each individual round is. Again, don't use the plus P loads because you don't train and you're lazy and you're incompetent with a handgun, so you think loading up a hotter load is going to make you more effective. You wouldn't give a kid who's not very good with a slingshot a hand grenade, right? And be like, well, you stink with this, but if I give you a much more powerful weapon, you'll probably be more effective. It's not a good strategy, right? You need to be good with 9mm first before you even consider plus P. Now, if you are, and you want to spend the money on it, again, but that's a disadvantage. It's expensive, and it's expensive to train with. Also, here's another thing. Again, nothing new if you've listened for a long time, but you should practice with a load that shoots the same point of aim, point of impact as your carry load. Period. That look good, and not all the time, right? If you're practicing your CQB drills on a full-size silhouette at 1 yard, at 3 feet, at, retention type shooting distances, it's kind of a moot point. But if you want to do any kind of serious training where you're, making headshots at any considerable distance or anything like that, you want to train with a round that shoots the same point of aim, point of impact as your duty ammo. It really doesn't do you any good to do a bunch of training with Winchester White Box 115 grain and load up your whatever plus P plus ammo and it shoots somewhere completely different. You're better off with a standard round that shoots the same point of aim, point of impact as some crazy hot round. You have no idea where it's shooting. Where's it going to shoot? I don't know. Roll the dice. Maybe the bad guy, maybe a 3-year-old girl standing behind him. Who knows, right? No, you need and not by somebody else. When fired by you out of your gun, it shoots the same point of impact as the ammo you train with. And that's harder to do with plus P and plus P plus loads. unless you hand load. If you hand load, I would not tell you to carry your hand loads for defensive use, but what I would say is it's pretty easy and doesn't cost a lot more to make a spicy load, as long as you stay within published parameters and all that stuff. Again, you blow yourself up, that's your fault, not my fault. Follow the data. But it's a lot easier and cost effective to load up spicy rounds, one of the many benefits of hand loading, right? You could load 124 grain similar bullet profile to your duty load, your carry load, and carry that load and tailor make your training load to shoot the same point of aim, point of impact. You can do it. And here's probably your easiest turnkey solution for this. Remember how I said in the beginning that Europe tends to load their stuff a little bit hotter? Well, it's not always true, but it's a fairly decent rule of thumb in my opinion that you consider a NATO load a plus P load. Most NATO loads are 124 grain. So if you consider that, you're talking 124 grain plus P. This is one of the exceptions, whereas a lot of NATO loads you can get surplus or semi-surplus. They load a lot of them, and they're fairly affordable. So you can get an affordable plus P load to train with. And again, I'm not saying this is going to work. You have to test this when fired by you out of your gun. But if you could, say, find a 124 grain NATO load, like bulk packs, affordably, that shot the same point of aim, point of impact, same bullet shape and everything as your 124 grain plus P Winchester Gold Dot, or your Spear Gold Dot. It's Spear Gold Dot. It's a Winchester Ranger. If you found let's say a NATO load that was affordable to shoot, to shot the same point of aim, point of impact. If it does that, it should have a pretty similar recoil impulse as your 124 grain plus P Spear Gold Dot. That'd be a good solution for this if you want to shoot the spicier ammo. But again, those are some major considerations. Another one is it's going to be harder on the gun, period. Just point blank. Or carte blanche. Like, you're dealing with more power. It's going to wear out the gun sooner. That's how that works. There's no free lunch. Now, if you shoot sparingly, it doesn't make a lot of difference. If you shoot a lot, it can absolutely make a difference. So it's something to consider. If you shoot a lot, and I would rather shoot a lot and be good, this is me, with standard and affordably priced 9mm ammo. I'm not saying I'll never shoot spicy ammo, but it's not my go-to. It's plus P plus is not my go-to. Anyway, just some other thoughts to consider on the hot 9mm loads. With that, we'll roll into the tactical tip of the day and then the tactical verse of the day. Now, talking about shooting these hotter loads and being harder on the gun, there are some things you can do to lessen the degree of this. Now, your main recoil spring is supposed to be changed. Say on a 1911, you're supposed to change it every 1,000 rounds. No big deal. That costs, I think, under $10. Now, I haven't checked since the crazy inflation of this year, but I think it's safe to say probably under $10 when I'm recording this. Who knows when you listen to it? Unless there's Weimar Republic inflation, then you're probably going to be okay. They're not that much money, especially compared to the gun and the ammo. If you're rocking, let's say a 1911, where you're supposed to change out the mainspring every 1,000 rounds, just keep a couple in your range bag, right? Who knows how many I have in my range bag right now? Just change them out every case of ammo. Not a big deal. Even Glocks, right? They don't run forever. You're supposed to change the recoil spring depending on the generation of the Glock, and there are differences for different models. But let's say, for argument's sake, 3,000 to 5,000 rounds. You're supposed to change that recoil spring. And I'm not going to give every manufacturer, but that gives you an idea. There are, for many common handguns, extra power recoil springs. And these can vary wildly in weight. Just whatever your standard is, they make heavier ones. The standard for an STI 2011 9mm is 7 or 8 pounds. So if you're shooting really hot ammo, you might want to move to an 8 or a 9. You have to test this when fired by you. I'm not saying you're going to do that and it's going to work. I'm saying you may want to consider a stiffer spring. You may also want to consider for something like an M&P. For a lot of guns, they make higher powered recoil springs, which is going to help the battering of that gun. For some platforms, they also make shot buffers. Consider this is kind of like, well, not kind of like, it's a piece of rubber on the back of the guide rod that, instead of, especially when that spring starts to get worn out, instead of slamming on the back of it and really beating up the gun, it kind of has this buffer. It's a recoil buffer. Wilson Combat makes them. Sure, they're not the only ones, but it's just a piece of rubber, so when it gets all the way to the back, instead of slamming metal on metal, you get that little rubber buffer. If you take out just any AR-15 that I'm aware of, unless you put in some kind of crazy aftermarket system, the standard buffer tubes of all different weights, when you're talking about an H2 buffer or whatever, they have a piece of rubber on the back, right? You can get those rubber buffers in some platforms if you want to shoot a lot of spicy loads. So something to consider. That is your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. The tactical verse of the day. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. Be sober, be vigilant, for your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.